It's going to be very exciting. So why don't you take time to like, share, tell somebody that you're watching. I see somebody's watching from Lake Mary, Florida. And tell us where you're watching from so we can make sure we have all that information, especially today, because we want to make sure we're touching people all over, not just in Houston, but literally all over the world. So I saw the first person on was Sister Cheryl Walker. She's on, and I see Gloria and Barbara and Teresa. So make sure you share it. Make sure you tell people your fans to watch, and those of you who are watching on YouTube, you can share it on there as well. And of course, I want to encourage the council members to make sure that you're sharing it. Girls, make sure you're letting us know that you're on, even if you're on with your parents. If you'll make sure you just tell us you're on. I see somebody from Mobile, Alabama, Pearland, Texas, Las Vegas, Nevada. So people are watching from everywhere. So thank you all so much for being a part. I see our Chief of Staff, Miss Karen, is already on. So that means that some of our council members are on already. Somebody's watching from Louisiana. So that's all good. So we're excited. So Dr. Mott, I'm going to turn it over to you for the next few minutes so you can begin to talk and share what's happening. And I've already shared it on my Facebook page. So everybody that should be watching.
All right. Well, good morning. Good morning, Dr. Bridget. And certainly good morning to the ladies that are taking out their time this morning to share with us and spend time learning about our health. Now, we are a combination of Bees Foundation, which includes a multi-generational program with our sassy ladies with the Missouri City chapter of Links Incorporated. It's HHS, or Health and Human Services, facet. And we are working on passports to stimulating healthy lifestyles. We know that in the African-American community and communities of color, many diseases, hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, certainly cancer, many of them are very prevalent in our community and don't really need to be. There are many aspects of those diseases that can be prevented. Certainly during this time that we are dealing with COVID-19, we are seeing a tremendous amount of stress, and this is real-time evaluation of what is going on in our community. Certainly we're seeing more and more people of color being affected by COVID-19, and certainly all over the world, people are dealing with the stress of of children not being in their schools, of financial stress. There's just a lot of anxiety and oftentimes mental health associated illnesses and depression. And many of those can come up during times like this. So we're taking this time today to speak with some of our true experts in the community about mental health. We're going to start with Dr. Janice Beal. And Dr. Beal is going to talk to us about COVID-19, about coping with COVID-19, and certainly dealing with the stress associated with that. Now, Dr. Beal is well known to our community. This is Dr. Janice Beal, and she is a researcher, a clinician, an author, and a behavioral expert. She is the president of Beal Counseling and Beal Behavioral Health. She has over 28 years of professional experience in clinical training for treating the emotional status and the emotional needs of her patients. She is well known in the Houston community as well as throughout the country. She is presently on the Mayor's Task Force for Special Needs and is a consultant for Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee on COVID-19 and mental health and COVID-19 and domestic violence. So Dr. Beal, we want to welcome you to our morning of health for African American and people of color, so that we can actually instill an episode of actual changes and understanding mental health, because we understand that many times mental health is not discussed in our communities, and we want to bring it to the forefront, and we want to make sure that others know what to look out for. So thank you again for joining us.
Let me unmute myself. Good morning, Dr. Mott. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning, everyone in the audience. Yes, I am elated to be able to be here with you this morning to discuss mental health. I think I live and I breathe because I think it's so important in our community that we're able to talk about what mental health actually looks like in order to be able to develop good mental health skills. And so, therefore, we are in the middle of one of the things that we've never been in the middle of before, and that is a pandemic. And trying to understand where we are and how we're going to get to the other side of what's taking place and emotionally to be intact when we actually do that. So I'm going to share my screen or have my screen shared right now so I can start and give you the information that I prepared for you. Can you please put the PowerPoint up for me, please? Can we start from the very beginning? Because I want to talk about stress. And stress is something that we all live with because of the fact that it's just a part of everyday life. Now, the concern is what type of stress and how long we're under a certain amount of pressure. Well, when I first started talking about this pandemic, we've not had a pandemic for over 100 years. So the research shows that the emotional, go back one, please. We're going to start after the titles page. Yes, we'll be right here. Yes, that's where I'll start. Thank you. That the emotional stress that people are under has been tremendous, okay? Because everything in our life changed so suddenly. We were thrown into this COVID-19 pandemic. We had to stop doing the things that we normally would do. Children had to stop going to school. People were losing their jobs. There's a great need for food. So everything started to happen all of a sudden. So the objective of today's PowerPoint is to just talk about stress because there are two types of stress. And I want the audience to be able to understand there's good stress that motivates us, but then the other stress is what stress that kind of debilitates us and keep us from going forward. And we have the stress of the holidays that are right on us as well. So now we have other factors into living with the pandemic for the last 8 months. Now we're trying to understand what is a holiday season is. Nothing as we have lived it before is going to look the same. So we have to be able to manage that stress for things that are happening in our lives because we don't have control over them. Next slide, please. Okay, stress is defined as anything that stimulates you and increases your level of alertness. Stress is usually perceived as pressure and strain with a sense of urgency attached to it. Next slide, please. So, in order to be able to understand, that's just like a basic definition of stress because of the fact that urgency, we have good stress, and we call that Euro stress. That type of stress takes place. Like, let's say you have a deadline that you have to meet, or let's say just this past week you were preparing for the holidays. So you were up cooking and you were preparing everything and you were getting everything that you needed ready for that Thanksgiving meal that you were trying to prepare. Well, at the end of the meal, you kind of relax because when you saw people indulging and eating the food, you felt like it was a really good thing. Same thing happens when kids have exams or you have pressures on your jobs that you're trying to meet. But the other type of stress is the stress that's consistent and it's long term, and that's the stress that becomes debilitating and has physiological impact on us as well. So we have the Euro stress on one side, then we have the other stress that's not so good stress. So how do we manage that? That's what we call stress management. And it's certain techniques that we learn to do in order to be able to manage the stressful things in our lives. Because some things we can control and some things we cannot control. So to be able to look at what that is and toward the end to be able to let go of the things that we can't control and to be able to work toward the things that we can should help in managing our stress. And so life without stimulus or life without certain things happening would be kind of boring. But life with an intense amount of things that are happening to us, that's where the stressful things come into impact. Excuse me. Next slide, please. Okay. So I'd like you to look and think really fast to the audience about what are the sources of stress for you right now. I initially started talking about different things and giving you things that I felt that I'm under stress. Even I've talked to people about working at home. That's considered to be stressful. Women taking care of everything and everybody in addition to what's happening with this pandemic has also a source of stress. So we have like survival stress. We have internally generated stress that comes from inside of us wanting to be perfect, wanting to be super women. We want to take care of everybody. We want to make sure that everybody's taken care of. We have environmental and work-related stress, and we have fatigue where we're just overloaded and overworked. I say, as a woman, sometimes I have to take off my cape, because without taking off my cape, I'm going to continue to fly, but I'm not going to continue to fly as high as I have been in the past. So I need to identify what are the sources of stress for me, as well as I'd like for you to do that. So if you have a moment, just take out a pen and just write down 4 or 5 things that are causing you stress right now. And as I end the presentation, let's see if you've been able to take at least 1 or 2 things off of that list. And you can write on a piece of paper, because no one's going to ask you to show that to me. I just kind of wanted you to be a part of what we're doing right now as far as a presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, so indicators of stress. When do you know that you're under a great deal of stress? Sometimes people really can't recognize it, because they're so used to functioning at this high level, or when the level goes up, they just keep functioning, they just keep working. So they really don't realize that they're under a great deal of stress until something actually happens. So we have physical, behavioral, and emotional indicators of stress. So physical, next slide, please, is what happens in our bodies, because our bodies will tell us when we're at a peak. For personally, when I'm at a peak, I start to shut down. I need to go rest. I need to sleep. I need to take care of myself. But we can have an elevated pulse, and our elevated blood pressure. We could have cold hands. We could have sweaty palms. We could have, it feels our heart is palpitating and it's going and beating really fast. And those signs are getting close to, people refer to those as anxiety. They don't realize that the stress has caused them an anxiety. So physiologically, they're feeling as though they're having a heart attack, because they start to have all the symptoms that are related to a heart attack. They could have gastrointestinal symptoms that come from, a lot of times, people that are under a great deal of stress. They start to have stomach aches. With children, they start to have headaches as well. Or you hear people oh, I don't feel well today, not realizing that stress has an impact. If you're having any of these signs, or not being able to, to sleep a full 8 hours, or whatever's going on in your life, those are physiological impacts or physiological signs that you're under a great deal of stress. Okay. And we need to identify those, and then try to see, like I said, toward the end, what are we going to do to rectify those and try to take some of those things off of our plate. Next slide, please. Okay. Behavioral indicators of stress. We tend to make poor judgment and decisions. We take a long time to make decisions, which means that if we had thought things through, we may act on impulse. We may have a loss of interest. We may become lethargic. We may be prone to accidents. Our productivity, even though we're doing things and we're performing as we normally would, what we produce, because we're under so much pressure, doesn't put out the same outcome that we normally would have done. Okay, so some of the signs that I've just mentioned are signs of depression. Okay, because depression, and the first sign I talked about, the physiological, may be anxiety, because we see a lot of anxiety as a physiological output of what happens with people. But depression is something that could, creep up on us, and we don't realize that we're depressed, and we're doing all these things, and all of a sudden we just start to just not care as much, or we become we sleep more or we sleep less. Our eating habits start to change. So which means that we may eat more when we're not actually hungry, in order to satisfy how we're feeling, as opposed to not eating enough. In addition to that, we may become where we just become like lethargic all over, flat affect, but yet we're going through the motion of doing the day-to-day activities. So, or we may have a short temper, that we're actually, snapping at people that really did not do something that we thought that they did, or we thought that they didn't do. And so therefore we have a short temper. So all these things are signs of we could be becoming depressed during this process. Now, there are different types of depression, because everybody experiences depression. There's clinical depression, to where you're not functioning at all. And so therefore the symptoms that I just gave you a few seconds ago are symptoms that will just shut you down. And then there are the symptoms of depression where we're able to function on a day-to-day activity. We do things daily, but we're just not feeling at our ultimate, or we're just not feeling good. So we need to recognize where we are. And everybody becomes depressed, but it's a matter of being able to identify and overcome it, or identify it and actually seek help if that's what we need to do. Next slide, please. Emotional indicators. I gave you a few seconds ago. Irritability, feeling loneliness. During this pandemic, I'm currently running a hotline for the city of Houston. And we've had a lot of calls where people are calling in that are lonely. And so the loneliness means that they're under a great deal of stress because they don't have anybody to talk to. We're not able to have those relationships that we normally would have had with others and families and friends. So we are doing what we're doing today, which means we're Zoom calling. I encourage people to do that. I encourage people to reach out to those who may live by themselves, who may be feeling lonely at this particular time. Another emotional indicator is irritability. I said that a second ago. You're irritable at something that somebody says that may not have anything to do with what's actually being said, but it's a reflection of what has been transpired just a few minutes ago or weeks ago, or how you're feeling. Feeling of worthlessness, tendency to blame others, emotional outbursts and crying, or on the opposite side, becoming hostile or aggressive. So you have these things that are happening to us that are byproducts of stress. We just have to be able to put a name to it, to know what they are, and to be able to see what are we going to do to get past them. So if you did take a second and write 4 or 5 things down, look at those things as I go through the next slides and determine what that actually means for you at this particular point that's causing you a great deal of stress. Next slide, please. Okay. And okay. Here's one thing that I've been talking about for the last couple of weeks as well to audiences, is preventing the holiday stress. Earlier I talked about the fact that we would be preparing the meal, and at the end, that stress that was the Euro stress, that was good stress, was when we sit down and we have people joining us. But I have to state that the holidays aren't necessarily always happy times for everybody. So traditionally, people tend to not want the holidays to happen because, let's say, you could have lost a loved one. If you lost a loved one during this time period, this brings about a sadness, and that sadness is natural because of the fact you start to remember not being there, that person not being able to be present, or if it's the first time. Holiday stress would be the routine of going to someone's house and not really enjoying it because of the fact that you have Aunt Susie who comes in. And Aunt Susie always says something that causes people to not feel comfortable. Or she always says something, for example, that really, really hurts, but people tend to overlook it because they dismiss the fact that it's Aunt Susie. I gave an example in an earlier presentation. There was someone many, many years ago that used to always say at a family gathering, when was I going to get married? And so please forgive me for this little joke that I'd like to throw in here. But I told her I decided I would have my children first before I would get married. And so when I said that, that was kind of like a caviar to stop asking that question and to allow me to come in and to be happy in the environment in which we were supposed to be able to eat and take place of. So we have to learn how to say no to people when we're under a great deal of pressure. If you're put under pressure during this holiday season of trying to do something and you really don't feel like it, or you really don't have the time, or you don't have the finances, we have to learn how to say no, and politely to say no. So if you're approaching the holidays and the holidays are not good times for you, one thing I've also tried to suggest to people is to try to change your what tradition, start a new tradition. Maybe this year it won't be the fact that you won't go to someone's home and you decide to have something. Maybe you decide to have a different type of meal. Let's say maybe you decide to have Chinese food or something that would have been totally different. You can set your own tradition, and therefore whatever makes you happy within whatever environment. So identify if the stress that's about to happen in the next 20 days is going to create so much pressure, in addition to the pressure that you're currently under, you can decide to change it. If it's having gifts or trying to provide for children, start early trying to find locations and places that are actually giving things for kids, or make gifts this year. Do holiday carols. Think of something different that would bring joy into your home and decrease the amount of stress that you may be under. Okay. Caffeine is another thing that we want you to decrease as well, especially during the holidays. If you're a coffee drinker and you drink a great deal of coffee, this may be the time that you want to start decreasing a little bit, because the anxiety and things that are caused by the caffeine could be overwhelming as well. Next slide, please. Okay. So what happens when we're stressed? I've given you all these factors of things that are stressful for us. We have what we call in our bodies the fight or flight syndrome. And what that actually means is that if you're under a great deal of pressure or something is happening, for example, you will start to react in a certain way. So our brain tells us that we have to do something because something in our environment has changed and is threatening to us. So when it starts to do that, we have our CNS system that kind of elevates. And so we fight or we run from the situation. There's an example that I like to always use. I was standing next to someone and a car actually ran over a child. That person was able to pick that car up with a strength that they didn't even know that they had. And they probably wouldn't have it in the next few minutes, but immediately they saw danger and they were able to do something. So this is what happens when our senses are heightened or when we're under a great deal of pressure as far as how our body will react. But we can't stay in that state for long periods of time because the chronic state of being at that level of responsiveness will cause the opposite. And so that's when we have the chronic stress that will cause health problems for us, and the cortisol in our brain will become hardened. And so therefore, that's what we don't want to happen. So our brain cells become impaired and memory and loss and heart disease and all the other things that are negative can be brought on by stress, in which we discussed earlier in a couple of previous slides. Next slide, please. Okay. So frequently discussed challenges of what's going on, this stress and this COVID-19. These are things that I've heard from people over and over about what has caused them stress. Abrupt changes, kids at home 24/7, technology challenges, learning how to work this computer, to be able to do the Zoom calls and things of that nature, inability to see relatives, COVID-related deaths. We've had, I'm sure someone knows at least one person that has been touched by COVID and has either, had to start prayer vigils in order for that person to make it, or maybe that person didn't make it. So we've had a lot of challenges with COVID-19. I've seen depression, anxiety, domestic violence is extremely high. It's important that if you're in a situation that's not a good situation with someone in your home, that you don't stay in that situation because it can become detrimental as far as your life or death. There are things in place that if you want to call and hotline, through the hotline, you can find out information where you can receive help for you and your children to be able to leave those situations. But I think the closeness in the environments and the lack of employment and the lack of the ability for people to be able to do things has increased our domestic violence and drugs and alcohol as well. We find that people are drinking more during this time period, or using drugs during this time period in order not to feel. Well, that just creates additional problems, okay? So that doesn't really stop everything. People are angry and there are a lot of financial challenges, and I see that there's a great need during this time for food. So there's a lot of things that are going on that are causing stress during COVID-19. Next slide, please. So what are we going to do? First of all, ladies, I'd like for you to look at those things that you've put down on that piece of paper. Hopefully you have. And I want you to look at what you've crossed out. And you've got to be able to cross out at least one thing by the time we finish. Now, I have these 5 things, and you see these 5 fingers that I want you to look at, because I want you to stop and pause for a second. It means let's take some time out for you, okay? Which means if you don't stop, and you keep going at a rate that's accelerated, something eventually will happen. So if we don't stop, and the most important person is you, because you won't be able to help anybody else in your families or anybody else unless you take care of yourself first. Another analogy I like to always use is if you're on an airplane and you're getting ready to take off, the first thing they tell you is that you have to put on the oxygen mask of yourself first before you put it on anyone else if you're traveling with small children. And I thought about that and I said, why is that the case? That's because if the cabin loses pressure, you're going to become unconscious. So you won't be able to help, just like anything else. So you have to stop and pause. You have to identify and take care of yourself first. And that means you have to make the time. How do you make the time to do that? People say, I'm under so much, I don't have any time, I can't do this, I can't do that. Yes, you can. You can either get up earlier than you normally would have gotten up. That's your time where you're going to take time for yourself. You can do it in the middle of the day when you have just a little time by yourself. You make that time. You can do it late at night, but you have to find time for the person that's most important, and that is you. For so long as women, we've been taught that we need to help others instead of helping ourselves, but we have to help ourselves first in order to be able to help others. So we have to retrain the way we've been taught in the past to understand how we're going to be able to continue to tackle all the things that are taking place. We connect with others. Connect meaning we have relationships, and we call people, we talk to people, we determine if so and so is okay. Just a call to say hi, how are you doing? A call to say, hey, do you need anything positive, or I need somebody to put something into me today. Okay, so we connect with others, because even though we may not physically be able to do that because of COVID-19, we just need to make sure that we're not isolating ourselves in order to set ourselves up for depression and things of that nature to come in. And finally, if we are seeing that we're in a space that's not a good space, we know how to seek help, and we need to be able to do that. And it's a phone call away. There are lots of services that are available that are free counseling services that you can call into that will help you to be able to make it through dark moments and dark times. So those are the 5 things for my press, pause, take care, make time, connect, and then seek help. Next slide, please. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. I can't give you a problem without giving you a solution. I'd like for you to exercise regularly. Okay, well, somebody said, I don't like to exercise. Sometimes you can do chair exercises and not really have to exercise and get up and go somewhere or what have you. So you can Google and you'll see exercises that you could actually do sitting down. Develop relaxation techniques. That's very, very important. And so we're going to talk, and we're going to do in the very end how to breathe and how to breathe effectively in order to decrease some of the stressful things that you're experiencing. Sleep. Sleep is very important. Sometimes we think that it's not. I hear people talk all the time, I can function off of 3 or 4 hours of sleep. That's not good, okay? Because our body needs to have that in order to be able to regenerate and to start over. Make major changes gradually. Don't make changes like overnight, but it takes time for change to get to a space, and it takes time for things to be able to be changed. Learn to forgive and forget, and remember to have fun. Laughter. Get those endorphins running. I tell jokes all the time in the middle of serious things because I want people to laugh. We want to be able to enjoy life. Life is going to bring us so many stresses as it is, so we just have to be able to enjoy certain things and be able to share and have good times with others. Next slide, please. Okay, healthy ways, and some of these things you're going to get as well as a handout. I think it's already been seen. I'm just going to go right here. Taking care of your body, taking care of you, connecting with others. I've said all the other things, but I want you to understand how important is taking care of your emotional, physical, psychological, and mental health. Is so, so important for you to be able to take care of others and to be able to make it through this difficult time with all the stresses. We've had racial issues we've had to deal with this past year. We've had the pandemic. We've had changes. So it's time for us to reset and start over as we approach the new year, because the pandemic is not going away as soon as we thought it would. So we just need to be able to go forward and be able to provide something for ourselves. Next slide, please. So taking care of your friends and family, be a stress reliever, but it should be balanced with care for yourself. Helping others cope with their stress, such as providing social support, and also make your community stronger. During this time of increased social distancing, people can maintain social connections and care for their mental health. Phone calls, video chats, whatever you need in order to be able to connect is very, very important during this time period. Okay. I think that we should be, next slide, please. Okay, so during this time, I'd like for, at the end of my presentation, this will only take a few minutes, I'd like for you to sit down, and I'd like for you to, if you're in a chair, if you're sitting already, put both of your feet on the floor. I'd like for you to take a moment to breathe. I'd like for you to close your eyes just for a few seconds. I'd like for you to Okay, so people have problems with trust, but that's all I want you to do is just close your eyes for a few seconds. Have your left hand on your left upper thigh, your right hand on your right upper thigh, closing your eyes, and I'd like for you to breathe. I'm just going to teach you one simple exercise. I'd like for you to breathe in, hold it, and breathe out. I don't want you to think of anything, anybody, anything that's going on. I just want you to take yourself to a happy space. And in that space, I want you to be able just to excel. And I'd like for you to not think about anything but where you are. Okay. I'd like for you to breathe in, hold it, and breathe out. Breathe in, hold it, and breathe out. Remember, you're not thinking about anything, no matter what's going on, no matter where you are, you're just thinking about whatever that happy space was for you. Breathe in, hold it, and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. Just practicing this simple exercise will help you to be able to manage your stress during stressful times. It's just a matter of just getting to a space, being by yourself, and allowing this to happen. We also, like I said, we'll have handouts as far as what else you need to do. All right, ladies, I will see you at the next part of the program. Dr. Mott, I'm finished.
Oh, I'm muted. Oh, I'm unmuted. Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Beal. Thank you for those exercises. Thank you for giving us updates on things that we need to be looking out for our stress and what is going on, because certainly the pandemic is continuing. We're into our third surge, and certainly there is a lot of concern about many things in our families, and we want to approach that so that we can keep our families safe. So thank you for your input, and we look forward to the questions in our panel discussion. Right now, we'd like to also introduce Dr. Carlin Barnes. Dr. Barnes is a licensed and certified child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist. She has over 18 years of practice experience with children, adolescents, and adults in psychiatry, and she delivers quality and compassionate therapy through her patients. She has recently co-authored a groundbreaking book entitled Understanding Mental Illness. And certainly for African Americans, that's something that we need to work toward, because we need to take the stigma off of mental illness and allow ourselves to be treated, and allow ourselves to have the privilege of talking to someone about the things that are going on in our lives. This book was released in September of 2019 by Skyhorse Publishing. Dr. Barnes is also the co-founder and co-owner of Healthy Minds MD. Dr. Barnes, welcome this morning, and thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for allowing us to hear more about what we should be doing for our children and thinking about the children as they are going through the pandemic. So welcome, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Dr. Mott, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you to the Missouri City chapter of the Links Incorporated for inviting me this morning, and to Dr. Hilliard and her team for inviting me as well. I am so pleased to be here because this is a very important topic. I have a slide presentation, but I believe they're being prepped, and so if they come up, great, but if not, then we'll just have a discussion. I'm so happy that we're talking about mental illness and taking care of our children in this time, because we have lots of things that are going on, and our kids are Our kids need a lot of help. You know, I think that people hear about the meme that went around on social media, and you know, the catch-all phrase, check on your strong friends. Well, we as parents, caregivers, church members, we need to check on our kids. Our kids are really suffering and having a hard time. And the things about youth is that they don't often have the vocabulary or know how to ask for help. So it's incumbent upon us to check in with them. And so let me just back up really quickly before we kind of jump into the presentation, the meat of it. And I want everyone to just think quietly for a moment about things, at least one thing that you're grateful for today. So just reflect on that for a second. And now that you have that in your mind, I want you to practice that daily, because as we go through the presentation, we'll be talking about tips and ways that you can help not only yourself, but importantly, your youth or your child or your niece or nephew to cope through this time of the pandemic. And so one of the things is to practice gratitude and gratefulness. So why do we want to talk about kids? We want to talk about kids because during the pandemic, kids are a at-risk group. Oftentimes we hear in the media that frontline workers, healthcare workers are an at-risk group, and to really check in on them and to thank them. And this is very true. Being a psychiatrist and continuing to work in the hospitals and the clinics and see patients is part of my work life. You know, there is a risk that goes with that, but there's a risk that goes along with being a youth during this time. And youth, along with elderly, frontline workers, essential healthcare workers, are at risk. At risk for what? Mental health negative consequences, physical consequences, and we really need to be checking in on them. Why are they at risk? Why are they a particularly vulnerable group? Well, if we look through history, we'll see that in times of great stress such as Hurricane Katrina and different kind of natural disasters, youth have both short-term negative outcomes and long-term negative outcomes. And the short-term outcomes can present during the actual crisis, so now as we're going through the pandemic, but studies also show us that 1 to 3 years later, you'll see a negative impact based upon what a child or a teenager went through during times of stress. And so you really want to check in on them. What's going on in their world that will make them particularly vulnerable? Well, as Dr. Bill so eloquently mentioned, youth have gone from the classroom setting, the campuses, to virtual learning, just like that. And, you know, it started back in March. Many schools shut down for safety reasons. I know my son is a college student, and he was actually having fun, enjoying his life during spring break. And all of a sudden he was told, you can't come back to campus. And so there's been a lot of acute traumatic change around learning. And just for adults, you know, a lot of our identity is tied into our careers and what we do. You know, our youth are students from the age sometimes of, you know, 1 or 2 all the way through college for many of them. And so what their identity has changed, and abruptly. And even those students who are now back in the classroom, it looks different. You know, I have a patient who's a teacher who I met with virtually, and if I didn't know her, I would have known her, because for safety reasons, of course, but she had her head wrapped, and she had on glasses, and she had on a face mask that came up to her eyes, and her, you know, her face shield. And so, you know, a lot of, even if they're back in the classroom, that's changed. They don't know from almost week to day if they're going to be sent home because of a COVID exposure. So that's one reason, just acute change and stress. Another reason is that our kids are worried about us. They're worried about their grandparents. Again, grandparents, older people are in the at-risk group. They're worried about if we're going to get sick. If we're going to get sick, who's going to take care of them? So they're worried about not only their health, but they're worried about our health. What else? You know, what else is going on that make our youth a particularly vulnerable group? Well, the youth are, they're lonely. You know, Dr. Bill again mentioned loneliness. Loneliness is very, very detrimental. Humans are meant to be social. We're social beings. And so when kids can't see their friends and they're isolated for safety reasons, they feel lonely. Adolescence, that's a particularly important time for developing peer relationships. And so if they're being, physically distanced and socially distanced, they can't go to games, they can't go to homecomings. All of this is really, really affecting them. And lastly, unfortunately, especially in some communities, homes aren't safe places for kids. Actually, kids get great nutrition when they go into the school environment. They get a chance to be around peers who are positive, teachers who are positive, mentors. And with all of that stripped away from them, their home might be lacking. Not only lacking, actually sometimes dangerous. And so we've seen rates of child abuse go up. And then lastly, we talk about the school and the learning, and yes, that's very important, but especially in my field, so many of my kids receive additional services that are very important to their well-being and their thriving. They receive occupational therapy, they receive speech therapy, they go to school, they get counseling. And so the schools actually provide a lot of services in addition to the very important service of education that they're not getting. And so our kids are really suffering. And so, and then we go through the holidays. Again, an additional stress for kids. The holiday season, as Dr. Bill mentioned, is very stressful for a lot of us. The holiday season without pre-COVID can really be a frantic time. Many look forward to it. It's a pleasurable time. It's a time to create memories. It's a time to have special celebrations and spend time with family and friends. And this holiday season, there's the additional stress of COVID. There are my slides. We can kind of walk through. I've covered a lot of the beginning ones, but if you can kind of go through the beginning to slide number 1, please. And so when we think about how to help our kids through the pandemic, as we've tackled other important lifetime events and experiences like school, how to get your kids and navigate the whole going back to school, as I've kind of touched on points about that earlier. Here we are with the holidays. So that's just my introduction. Again, I have a private practice in Houston, Texas. I'm the co-founder of Healthy Mind MDs. I'm the co-author of Understanding Mental Illness, and I am a board certified child and adolescent and adult psychiatrist. Next slide, please. So again, jumping back out before we kind of drill down to COVID and the holidays, the facts. So why should we be checking in on our youth? Mental illness can and does affect children and youth, teenagers. Many of the patients that I see have clinical anxiety, they have clinical depression, they have been diagnosed and they're in treatment for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So while our kids are very resilient, and that's a great thing, our kids also can suffer many of the mental illnesses and mental health conditions that we do as an adult. We actually know that more than half of the mental health conditions begin before the age of 14. So if you think about that, that's very important because you're really setting the stage on your child's or a child's productivity, their quality of life. And we know that early intervention makes a difference. And so if you begin to get your child treatment, if they are suffering at an early age, then you can really change the trajectory of how their life will be once they're an adult. 1 in 5 youth every year will experience a mental health problem, whether that's an episode of clinical depression, whether that's social anxiety. We know that 1 in 5. So that's really a great number if you think about like how many kids are in your life, in your church, in your community. So it's incumbent upon us again to pay attention, know the signs, use the tips that we'll give you, and to seek help. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that suicide is the second leading cause of death in youth ages 10 to 24. So it's a real issue because we know suicide is a very big problem. And a lot of times in certain communities, we don't talk about these things because they may not be pleasant or make us uncomfortable, but we really have to start checking in. Next slide, please. So again, we talked about this a lot already, but COVID-19, the facts are is that our youth are an at-risk group, and that we know studies are already showing us that along with adults, the rates of clinical anxiety and depression have increased by 30%, almost 40% in teens and youth who are reporting how they're feeling going through this pandemic. Next slide, please. So what can we as caregivers, parents, aunts, uncles, godparents do to help our kids? So what we can do to help them cope with these unprecedented times and going through the pandemic is, first, we need to check in. We need to ask them, how are you feeling? How are you doing? How are you coping? We need to validate how they're feeling. We need to let them create a safe space so they can talk openly and honestly and know that they can come to us. And this isn't one conversation, because as we see, the pandemic is ongoing. There's no end in sight. Here we are in month 9. You need to check in with the youth in your life often, weekly, so that they know that you're concerned about how they're doing. We need to accept how they're feeling. Parents, I'm a mom. We want to try to fix everything. Some things can't be fixed, but if a person knows that the youth in your life knows that you're caring, they'll open up to you and you can be honest. Hey, I don't have all the answers. No one does. This is a pandemic. We've never been through this before, but I'm here for you and we're going to figure this out. Allow them to express their negative feelings. Again, in certain communities, I asked a patient, an adult patient, African-American female, when did you ever see your mother cry? When she was growing up as a child, and she said, I never saw my mother cry. And I said, do you really think that's because she never felt sad? Or she never cried? So we need to begin to get comfortable, even though it's uncomfortable, some of these emotions, in sharing them and expressing them. Because if you don't express them, they're going to come out in unhealthy ways. And in kids, that looks like substance abuse, risky sex, early sex, irritability and anger issues. So allow your child the space to be able to express negative emotions. Limit their exposure to TV coverage about some of these very upsetting things. Yes, you want them to know the facts. You want to know the facts. But watching the news all day talk about, the numbers are rising in COVID and this school is shut down and that school is shut down and there's no cure is not healthy. To know the facts, go to factual sources. Teens, our youth, they live on their mobile devices. They're constantly on TikTok and Instagram. Great, for relaxation, but you don't want that to be your source to learn relevant, up-to-date, accurate information about something as serious as this health and global pandemic. So go to the cdc.gov for factual information. And in fact, if you haven't been to the CDC's website, they have great information on things like how to manage the holidays, how to manage going back to school, knowing if you're at risk, what you should do. So go to the cdc.gov. Next slide, please. And again, we're here on the holidays, and a lot of what I've been asked is last year, even before COVID, I had a lot of speaking engagements around how to handle the holidays. So as you can imagine, with the stress of the holidays and it being different this year, looking different this year, how can we help our youth? Well, the one thing is to keep the focus on safety. We're making things different for our family. Other families are making things different because we really want to stay safe. Safety is key. Next slide, please. Other things that you can do to help youth is, again, CDC has an entire, button tab on how to handle the holidays with COVID. So use your resources. The next thing I always say is have a plan. Now we're in the thick of the holidays. Holidays started October, as you saw it with Thanksgiving, as you saw in the previous slide, and go through December, the New Year's, and even after. And so it's a long time. Have a plan of how you and your family, your kids, your teenagers are going to handle the holidays, because they're going to be different. And to just kind of go through day to day to week and not have a plan is really setting people up to feel depressed, lonely, anxious, and so forth. Include them on your plan, communicate, take time out. The next thing you want to do is to also be flexible. Don't cancel traditions, don't cancel, but just be creative and develop new workarounds. And focus on however it looks and feels to be socially connected, even though we're practicing physical distancing. Practice self-care. Let your kids know self-care is important. We did a grateful moment, but let your kids know that eating properly, avoiding alcohol, they shouldn't be doing it anyway, but older teens may, don't overindulge in fattening foods, getting plenty of rest, staying well hydrated, practicing mindfulness. All of this is important for us as adults, and it's important to teach your kids these healthy habits. Next slide, please. We're wrapping up. So what if you have done all these things and you still see that youth in your life is having problems? What can you do? So again, look for signs, listen to them, listen to what they're saying, allow them the space, talk to them, communicate. A lot of times as adults, we can be very busy and we're taking care of everything, and we don't take time to actually talk to our kids in meaningful ways and meaningful conversations. And if you're still thinking that your child is having problems managing, seek help. Next slide, please. And so on these slides, I won't go through them for the sake of time, but I have lots of resources. A lot of times in certain communities, we may think that mental health treatment is just for them or the other people, or I don't know how to access care. Care isn't available to me. So I have lots of resources. One I want to point out is it's blackgirlsmile.org, and it's a great resource that I found that really is tailored to helping Black female youth to protect their mental health, and if they need mental health treatment, to get mental health treatment. I called out my book, Understanding Mental Illness, Dr. Carlin Barnes, Dr. Marquita Wills. We're two psychiatrists, African-American females. We came together to write a really relatable book, and we have a whole chapter on pediatric psychiatric conditions. We have resources at the end of it. Next slide, please. The book is available on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. It's a great resource. And then lastly, I have a slide for national hotlines. These hotlines don't provide treatment, but they do have oftentimes 24-hour staff, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and can point you to resources in your community. And again, I want to point out the Steve Fund, a wonderful resource. I know our youth like to text. There's a number that you can text. There's a website, and it's a organization that is really dedicated to providing information and resources to our Black and brown youth. So next slide. Wrapping up here, thank you for your time, and I thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Ooh. Hello. Hi. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Barnes, for all of that just unbelievable information. And certainly we've not been appreciating that in our communities. And many of us, certainly as mothers and grandmothers, we want our children to be successful all the time. And certainly during the pandemic is no different. So we want to consider the things that they are going through. And certainly by you providing us the guidelines and providing us opportunities to go to not only cdc.gov, but multiple other places that are really designed for us, then that helps us to get opportunities that we would not have had. So we thank you for your time and thank you for your service. And we look forward to your questions on the panel. We'd like to take a moment. We've gotten a lot of information, ladies, but we'd like to take a moment just to have some fun. We always said that every Saturday, first Saturday we got together, we'd always have fun. So Dr. B, are you still available? We're going to go ahead and start our game, okay, if that's okay. And because we'd like to give out some prizes. Certainly we know that everybody has been listening and taking notes and getting information. So we'd like to see which of our participants on Facebook and on YouTube are fast enough to play the Kahoot game. we've pinned it on your comments, and Miss Tiffany Hatchett and Kaylin Henderson are going to help us with this game. Tiffany, are you?
We're ready. So we'll launch the game. While we're launching, if you all could log into www.kahoot.it. And then I see some of you are already
All right, so
ready to go here.
We're ready.
This is fantastic. Enter the game pin 464238. And then please insert your first name and last initial. And as soon as a couple more people join, we'll get ready to play the game. Remember, the game is won through speed and accuracy. So the fastest person to answer the questions correctly will win, and the winners will get Amazon gift cards sent to them. So once we announce the winners, please put your full names in the chat, and we'll make sure to get your prizes to you quickly. So I see right now we have 13, 14, 15. The participants are growing here. So in a moment, we will get started once we know more people have joined. People are still joining. This is going to be fun. A great way to test, to make sure you guys have been absorbing all the great information. All right. So players, join quickly. And once we hit 30, oh, we're over 30. I think we can go ahead and get the game started. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Which is not a source of stress? Is it uncertainty for red, internally generated stress, yellow, fatigue and overwork, blue, or calm, peaceful environment, green? Let's see. The correct answer is calm, peaceful environment. So next question. Let's see. Gabriel H. Wow. All right. More than one half of mental health conditions begin at the age of, is it 85 for red, 45 for yellow, 20 for blue, or 14 for green? Let's see, the answers are coming in. It's 14. So you guys got that right. Let's see. Leaderboard has shifted to Tiffany Pearl. Okay, it's getting competitive. Which is a physical indicator of stress? Is it a smile for red, big hugs for yellow, elevated pulse and blood pressure for blue, or relaxed posture for green? Okay, the answers are coming in. Okay, elevated pulse and blood pressure is the answer. Tiffany Pearl holding on to that lead. Next question. The second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 24 is it falling for red, suicide for yellow, drowning for blue, or heart attack for green? And I think Dr. Barnes covered this question in her presentation. Correct answer is suicide. 19 of you got it right. Let's see if there's been a change. Oh, Tiffany Pearl holding on to that lead. Next question. Which is not an emotional indicator of stress? Is it loneliness for red, joyful mood for yellow, anxiousness for blue, and hostile and aggressive behavior for green? Which is not an emotional indicator of stress? Might be a trick question here. Correct answer is a joyful mood. So most of you got that one right. Let's see. Tiffany Pearl's holding on to the lead. Okay, guys, let's go. As many as 1 in blank youth will experience a mental health problem each year. Is it 1 in 5 for red, 1 in 15 for yellow, 1 in 10 for blue, or 1 in 20 for green? Okay, the answers are coming in. Almost there. Correct answer is 1 in 5 youth will experience mental health problems each year. All right, the leaderboard is not moving. Next question. Which is not a way to prevent holiday stress? Is it overcommitting for green, limit caffeine for yellow, create a routine for blue, or share responsibilities for green? So which is not a way to prevent holiday stress? Okay. It is red. Overcommitting is not a way to prevent holiday stress. So next up, which are not positive coping skills? Is it take breaks from watching the news, red, drinking and smoking, yellow, take care of your emotional health, blue, or take care of your body, green? So which are not positive coping skills? Correct answer, drinking and smoking are not positive coping skills. So 17 of you got that right. Let's see, Tiffany Pearl's on fire. Still the winner here. Next question, which groups are at risk to respond more strongly to a pandemic? Is it pets for red? Is it infants for yellow? Is it children, teens, and the elderly for blue? Is it grandparents for green? Let's see, the answers are coming in. Correct answer are children, teens, and the elderly are more strongly to respond to a pandemic. Let's see, Tiffany Pearl still in the lead here. Last question, where can you learn factual information about COVID-19? Is it Snapchat for red? Is it cdc.gov for yellow? Is it Facebook for blue? Or the National Enquirer for green? Final question. Here we go. www.cdc.gov is a great place to get factual information about COVID-19. All right, so let's see who are the winners. So in third place, we have Lisa C. In second place, we have Sarita H. And in first place, our overall winner is Tiffany Pearl. No surprise there. And so we will also look and get you guys the Amazon gift cards. If you could send your full names to us in the comments, we'll be happy to get those cards to you as quickly as possible. Next, we're going to bring our speakers back up and turn it back over to Dr. Bill, Dr. Barnes, Dr. Hilliard, and Dr. Mott to answer any questions, burning questions you all may have.
Thanks, Tiffany and Kaylin. That was great. So much fun.
Awesome.
Dr. Mott's still on mute.
I'm still on mute. Okay. I'm sure everybody's going to be excited about getting their Amazon cards.
Yes.
Amazon is on the block every week, almost every day now with the pandemic. So we'd like to bring back our panelists, Dr. Beal and Dr. Barnes. And Dr. B, if you see chat questions in the chat, and we could begin to ask those and see if our participants can get as much information of their personal questions answered as well.
Okay, I'm looking in the chat, and I will give people time to put questions up. Don't know if they knew to start asking the questions, but
Well, I have one for Dr. Beal. You talked about, I know you're working with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee on getting information out on COVID-19 and mental health. Are there places where people are struggling, what they can do to help themselves? Are there people that they can talk to? Is there a helpline, and how do they get in touch with it?
Okay, thank you. Yes, the city of Houston, and along with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, has Let's Beat COVID-19, which is a helpline. And the phone number that anybody can call is 713-999-9442. Again, that's 713-999-9442. And we have counselors that are there. The hours of operation are from 1 p.m. to 11 o'clock p.m. daily. So that's 7 days a week. And we're staffed by counselors who can help as far as mental health concerns, and we're helping with just basic needs. So we have callers that are calling in who may need food, clothing, shelter, resources, places to go doing COVID, based on if they're locked in and don't have anywhere, because they have to have a way in order to be able to isolate. So we have a lot of information. We have a lot of resources that are available. So callers can call in starting at 1 p.m. every day. This program will last only until December the 24th. So we are going through the holidays, and we'll take you right up to Christmas Eve. But we'll see what happens after that, because it's funded through the CARE Act funds with the city. And so we have a lot of collaborative and a lot of efforts that we're putting together. So it's 9713-999-9442. And we have a website. And I'll hurry up and finish because I talk long. But the website is www.houston-beatcovid.com. And every Tuesday and Thursday, we have workshops for parents to go on to from 6:30 to 7:30 in English and 7:30 to 8:30 in Spanish. So we have a lot of resources. We have, like Dr. Barnes was talking about, we have parents, we have toolkits for elementary, middle school, and high school. Parents can pull that information down. So we have just a lot of resources on the website, or they can call the helpline.
And this helpline is free? This counseling is free?
No, it is free. It's absolutely free. Anyone can call, and they can call as many times. And we've had all types of calls, from just basic calls, just finding out information, parents who were stressed during schoolwork, to people who are actually suicidal. So we have lots of calls that are coming in. So we're able to take, because we have lots of counselors that are waiting. So they'll be ready at 1 o'clock today.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
One question, someone's asking for contact information for Dr. Barnes.
Great, thank you for that. So my contact information, you can find me on Instagram at Dr. Carlin, CarlinB. You can visit my practice's website at drcarlindbarnes.org. And I am here in Houston, Texas. My contact information for my private practice, the phone number is 713-521-5930. Again, 713-521-5930. Thank you for that.
Then one question is, how do you prevent your child from being labeled? If your child is having some mental health challenges, how do you prevent them from being labeled in the education system?
Is that for me or Dr. Bill, or either one of us?
Either one. Since you're more for children and adolescents.
Oh, you want me to take it, Dr.
Go ahead, Dr. Bill.
Okay. So labeling within the school system takes place through the ARD meetings. Your child cannot be labeled unless they go through an ARD process. And that stands for admissions, referral, and dismissal. And that takes place with a collaboration between the school, the diagnostician that's actually tested the child, as well as the teacher, in gathering information about your child's behavior. And we also utilize outside professionals such as Dr. Barnes reports and my reports, or anyone else's reports, who's a mental health clinician. So it requires a lot of information in order to get a label. They just should not be able to label your children because that's not how it works with the state of Texas. So it's important, if you think that your child is having problems, that you bring that team of people together. And the first part starts with the testing in order to be able to determine what the concerns are. We cannot, or the school district cannot just give a label without having any type of documentation to determine what it is, unless it's something from a mental health perspective, as far as ADHD, attention deficit disorder. Dr. Barnes talked about that, or either anxiety, depression, or things of that nature. And that's on the emotional side, as opposed to the behavioral side. So I would suggest for all parents to please try to do a collaborative effort with the school and an outside clinician, as well as the people that are provided within the school district. I'm not sure how they're doing right now during the pandemic as far as testing services are concerned, because it was difficult prior to pandemic because we had so many kids, or the school district in general had so many kids that they were trying to meet the needs of. But you may want to reach out and get additional information and see that process. And go to your school's secretary, because they have the book that they can give you, a parent's help handbook on the state of Texas rules for how diagnosing and 504 takes place. And every parent's health handbook should be in everybody's and every principal's office to be able to give you to look up information.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a question for Dr. Barnes. You know, certainly all of our children are not experiencing all aspects, okay, of this time period, but all of our children are looking forward to the holidays. So how would you encourage parents to help them with getting through the holidays, to have a good holiday experience despite the pandemic? Can we do this? And what should we be doing? How can that help in the family as well?
Great question. The short answer, Dr. Ma, is yes, we can. So one thing is that, again, we need to have a plan. You know, the holidays are here. And to just sit down with your kids in a unrushed, unhurried time and ask them, what do you know about the pandemic and how has it affected or changed our lives? And then bring that into, so now we're in the holidays. And so our family is going to have a good time. We're going to create some new memories, but it's going to look different this year. Some people have lost jobs. Some, financial situations are different. And so it's important to be honest and open about those things with kids. Some kids have lost grandparents due to the pandemic and they're not here this year. To have conversations that are honest and open and truthful, and to bring it to the forefront, but then bring it back to, but there's hope. We can still have special memories. We can get the Christmas tree out. We can decorate the Christmas tree. We're going to just have, a celebration in our family this year. We may FaceTime with our family in Louisiana or New York, but we are still going to be able to have a good time. Kids don't really do so great with delayed gratification, but to say next year, hopefully we can get back to doing the things that we do. We can travel, we can take that vacation. But this year we're going to be safe, and we're going to be safe together. We're going to, love on each other, and we're still going to have a great time, but we are going to do things different, and we're going to include you in the discussions and the planning on how things can be different and safe. And then, kids are going to want to be with friends and so forth, but to do that with the safety measures and precautions in mind. And if it's not okay, then to help them to understand why it's not okay. But the main thing is to communicate, to be positive, and to ensure them that safety, love, things that you can't put price tags on are going to be what we're going to focus on this year.
Are there any things that parents can go to for opportunities to look at things that they might do with their children at different ages to help to bring this into focus? Certainly,
yes,
going to be able to get out, to see all of their family, all their cousins in Louisiana or wherever they are. But they have parents and they're together, whatever family structure they have, they're going to stay in their bubble. But what can the parent do in that bubble to bring happiness into the bubble?
Right. So again, CDC has a great kind of algorithm and flow sheet. So I would advise parents to go there. But some of the things they talk about, they're, have set up a dinner time, video conferencing. So everybody's in their own bubble, in their own homes, but we're sharing our dinner time together in a virtual, visual way. You can help enlist your kids if they're younger in making Christmas cards that everybody's going to send to each other. We can do a drive-by. We might not be able to get out and spend hours dancing and so forth, but we can drive by and everybody can be outside at their designated time so that you can still be able to say hello, lay your eyes on, and love on each other from a distance. We can also, another thing that people have done, they've dropped off meals at the door. So everybody's responsible for making a certain meal, the vegetables, the collard greens, and people drop off and share. And so that's a way to still be actively engaged and still be safe and distant. So those are some things that we can do creatively to make this year look different, but still to enjoy each other in the holidays.
Okay, fantastic. Those are great.
Yes.
Dr. B, do we have any other questions on the chat?
Yes, a couple of people said they're dealing with anxiety over their children and grandchildren taking the vaccine. And do you believe enough testing has been done to give people the actual vaccination for COVID?
Okay, we are going to stick with the mental health today. Okay? These are mental health professionals. But what I will say is if you guys sign up, and we encourage you to sign up for every first Saturday, we are going to talk about the vaccine. This grouping with these girls and sassy ladies with Missouri City Links is about real-time health in our community.
Right.
And we see that African Americans are suffering in the community from COVID virus, and the vaccine is coming out, and we have a personal kind of the distrust in our community, or we have had for vaccines. And so we are going to have some of our infectious disease professionals from both here in the city and throughout the nation that you have seen that will come to us next month and talk to us about COVID-19. So I really encourage you to go ahead and sign up for this, because we're going to hear a lot of straight talk about the vaccines from others that are working on the vaccines and are just like us.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Awesome. Well, this has been great. I don't see any more questions on the chat. It's been great information. And of course, my position on all of this is to always stay in faith, always believe God to overcome any situation that you're in, and definitely seek the help that you need. And as Dr. Mott said before, so often as African Americans, we push back on getting the help we need for therapy and mental health. And so just because you're walking in faith doesn't mean you cannot seek out mental health assistance and getting the assistance that you need. So I really want to encourage you to get the information, read the information, get the book so that you can have the information you need to help yourself first and then help your family members.
I do want to say one other thing that we did. We're running out of time because we're getting so much information. Okay, but we always want to do our raffle at the end for those people that sign up at first. So their names will be placed in the chat and they will be receiving their Amazon cards. So we never get together without having fun and taking time to get education. So thank you, ladies, so much for spending your time this morning. And thank you, Dr. B, for giving us this avenue to reach out to others in the community. We really appreciate you.
Absolutely. And I think they have the raffle winners already. I'm not sure, Deslin, if you do, can you guys put it up right away before we end? That way they'll know.
That would be great.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic.
If we go off, I don't know if they can put it in the chat. Waiting on Deslin or Brianna to answer me. Let's see what they said.
Raffle winners are there. Cheryl Walker, Gwen Berry, Jacqueline,
no last name.
Lakeisha Hughes, Eartha Giles, and Rose Duffield. And you will be receiving your cards on your email. Look out for those emails, ladies.
Right. And the Kahoot winners were Tiffany Pearl Bryant, Sarita Hood, Lisa Chisholm. So those ladies will be getting your gift cards. So thank you all once again for being a part. And as Dr. Mott said, sign up for next month, January 2nd. It'll be the second day of the new year. So go ahead and sign up now. Text B Health to 71441. Thank you, Deslin. Thank you, Brianna, for coordinating everything. You guys are the best. The best.
You are the best. You are the best.
Yes. Well, Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy New Year to you, and we'll see you on January 2nd.
All right. Thanks, ladies. Bye.
Bye.